Good afternoon, everyone. It is Tuesday. It is 4 p.m. ET, and we are so thrilled that you have found us here on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 14, going on 15 novels of suspense. My latest book is The House Guest, which went into a second printing after 6 days, and I am incredibly grateful to you for that. And I am working on the book for February, which is called One Wrong Word, and you will hear about that when the time comes. I'm coming to you from Newton, Massachusetts, where it is absolutely torrentially pouring and there is lightning and thunder. So I hope you don't hear that, but we will persevere here on Crime Time and bring you today's amazing novel. We had the absolute joy of introducing you to Sandra Miller, whose brand new novel, Wednesdays at 1, is now out for like a week or so. Are you in the second week or third week? Brand new novel. And let me tell you, it is from Zibby Publishing, the coolest publisher on the planet, and Zibby Owens, the coolest person on the planet. And Zibby herself said, I couldn't stop reading this book and never saw the ending coming. It's insightful and rich and everything you want in a summer novel. Welcome, Sandra Miller, and your brand new Wednesdays at 1. What did you think? Is it raining where you are too?
It is pouring here in Arlington. Yes.
It's amazing. And you have thunder and lightning?
Thunder and lightning. Yes. Let's hope this continues smoothly.
It will. It will. We're glad that we're both cozy inside. Yeah. What did you think when you heard from Zibby?
I was absolutely thrilled beyond words. It was October of 2021, and I had just finished the book, and I saw that Zibby had started a publishing house. I had been on her podcast for my memoir Trove a couple of years earlier. And so when I realized she had started a publishing house, I zipped the book off to her and I heard from her within the week. And it was yes. Yeah. And she said she read it on a plane from New York to California, and she had a million things to do and she couldn't put it down. And she wanted to make me an offer, and I was all in. It was a great day.
That does sound like it's about as good a day as it could possibly be. Was it, Sherry saying, the best type of book? Were you nervous to send it to her?
No, I knew her professionally and I trusted her. I loved what she was doing. I loved that she was trying to shake up the publishing industry with this women-owned company. I thought she had a great vision, and I was thrilled at the possibility that she might even consider it. And when she took it, I just floated around the rest of the probably week.
I mean, it's interesting because Zibby is a visionary, and her sort of embracing and putting her arm around Wednesdays at 1 and you is such a moment of realization that you've written a great book.
It felt that way. It really did. And it was very validating. And interestingly, at that point, I didn't have an agent, and she was accepting unagented submissions. So the next step would have been to find an agent for the book. And so when I skipped the agent step, which is very unusual in this process, but it ended up serving me well. And I've had a great experience. This is about 2 years later, and it's been a fabulous ride. It's been a really, really different experience working with a publishing house that tries to connect authors and really values communication, connection between authors, and trying to create a kind of family, amongst the authors and with the people who work at the publishing house. So
you can really see that from your posts on social media, the sort of camaraderie and the sisterhood of the women who are working with Zibby and who she helps and connects and supports. And you have, speaking of helps and connects and supports, you have so many people joining us. When I look over here, I'm looking at the comments, you all. Here is Renee and Kathy, and Emily is here, and Sherry is here. So many people are coming. Pamela Fry Priest is here. Emily, again, as I said, and Deborah is back, who just won a book on the last show, and that is great. Sherry Steuben says, good afternoon. And Mighty Blaze is here in the back room. Margaret says it's a double trouble kind of Tuesday, who is excited. We are very excited for Wednesdays at 1 here on Tuesdays at 4 on Crime Time. If you don't know about A Mighty Blaze was started 3 years or so ago by the fabulous powerhouse duo of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt. Speaking of literary family, to keep us all speaking about books and reading new books and discovering new authors, maybe talking to some of our favorite authors or making a new favorite author, one of whom will certainly be the fabulous Sandra Miller. Let me tell you a little bit about Sandra before we get to some questions about Wednesdays at 1. As Sherry says, love finding new authors and books. Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? And I've met so many wonderful authors and so many wonderful people doing Crime Time, and it's been such a joy to see you all join us every Tuesday. But let's talk about Wednesdays at 1 and Sandra Miller. Sandra Miller is the author and award-winning memoir Trove, I'm trying to say Trove, A Woman's Search for Truth and Buried Treasure, and we will talk more about that in a moment. She has written about relationships and self-discovery for the Boston Globe, the Christian Science Monitor, and many other publications. Her essay about her unconventional love story with her husband was made into the short film Wait, directed by Trudy Styler, you know who that is, and starring Kerry Washington as Sandra. Starring Kerry Washington as Sandra, and we'll talk about that as well. She teaches writing at the University of Massachusetts at Lowell and lives outside of Boston with her husband, with whom she has 2 grown children. As I said, her brand new book, just out for about 2 weeks, is Wednesdays at 1. Sandra, welcome.
Thank you, Hank. It's great to be here.
Tell us a little bit. I've been trying to figure out how to characterize what this book is. It's literary suspense, psychological suspense. How would you characterize the genre of this book?
Yeah, I think it's a hybrid. I call it literary suspense. It has elements of thrillers. It's a psychological story, but I like literary suspense for this. And even if it's not a sort of designated category, but as we were saying before, it unfolds. The characters are rich. There are unexpected twists and turns, but really, what came before the twists and turns for me were strong characters. And so I was really interested in building strong dysfunctional characters and people who are having troubling relationships before I thought, okay, there have to be a lot of plot twists here.
Just like real life, this book is so realistic. Hey, Connie Mooney says hi, Sandy's happy to be watching in. That's great, and we're happy that you're here too, Connie. And it's very realistic. This book is so relatable and so honest and so straightforward and gorgeously written. What was the germ of this story? Where did the idea come from? Can you excavate that?
Oh, I can. Actually, it comes from a real life horror story, unfortunately. So, about 29 years ago, when my husband and I were still dating, we've been married for 29 years, he had a client who began stalking him. And there was this woman who would wait outside of our home with the windows open in the summer, listen to our conversations, and then she would bring snippets of these conversations into their therapy session, sort of obviously invading his home life and his private life. So this happened to us. It would become a 4-year nightmare, this stalking ordeal, that would take a lot to solve it. It would become litigious, and we would have to get the police involved. But the original germ of this novel, the seed, came from that experience when I thought, what if you have a psychologist and he has a client who knows things about him that she shouldn't know. Usually the psychologist is the one in control, right? And the patient is usually the vulnerable one. So I like the idea of reversing it and making the psychologist vulnerable because a patient had control or had some information about him. So I wasn't at all interested in writing into the details of the stalker story as it happened in real life to us. But I did get to thinking about psychologists and how they could be vulnerable if a client knew something about them.
And talk a little bit about that balance of power and how the imbalance works when the patient seems to know something about the psychologist. What would really happen in those kinds of situations?
Well, a good psychologist would stay in control and probably take the situation to a superior and maybe hand it off to another person. But we can't have that in a novel, right? And that's why psychologists are often in thrillers, right? Because they're in a particularly interesting position. They're supposed to be very professional, very moral. We hold psychologists and therapists to a high moral standard. So when they slip up, or we see a problem um, with a profession that's supposed to be very moral, very reflective, very insightful, very self-reflective too. Um, that creates a lot of possibilities for plot. And so in real life, a professional psychologist would deal with this in a very different way than Gregory Weber does in my book. But then we wouldn't have a good book.
And we wouldn't have a book. And he behaves, and we'll talk about this in a minute, in a very believable way. We understand why he's doing what he's doing. Kim says, talk about writing what you know is scary. Indeed, scary. And we'd love to hear more about that as well. But let's go back to in the novel. So the thing about having a therapist as a main character, a therapist who has to make decisions, is that they're also smart, and they're having to balance their knowledge, their medical knowledge and their psychological knowledge versus their own personal needs and motivation, and trying to balance which one is more important. And they spend their lives trying to compartmentalize themselves out, their personal selves out. And once that line gets broken, that's what this novel is about. So talk a little bit about the research that you had to do. So many of your reviews have lauded you for the authenticity of the therapist.
Well, it's very good to be married to a psychologist if you want to write a book about a psychologist, right? So when we think about any profession that we're exposed to and we learn the inner workings of, just almost by osmosis or daily conversations with my husband about therapy dynamics, session dynamics.
Mhm.
Obviously, I'm not learning anything personal about clients. That goes without saying, but we have a lot of conversations. I'm really curious about diagnoses, about session dynamics, about all sorts of aspects of psychology. So I'm constantly asking Mark to tell me stories from the business. And a lot of the research I did over 29 years of living with a psychologist. And that was interesting because then when I went to write the book, I had this very strong, solid knowledge about psychology. So it allowed me to go more deeply into the characters. I didn't have to spend 6 months or a year researching psychology or a psychologist's way of life or professional details. Instead, it allowed me, I had an understanding of the character, so I was able to go sort of deep into his psyche.
And one of the things about a psychologist, the relationship in therapy, is that each of the people involved has a role. The psychologist does what the psychologist is supposed to do, and they know what they're supposed to know. But the patient may not be telling the truth. The patient might be coloring what they say in order to convince the psychologist of something, which is then something that the psychologist has to figure out.
Yeah, that's very true. And it's interesting something that you said before, which was that there is a clear line. And there's a way that a psychologist can share some information about themselves with the patient, but then there's a very clear line. If it starts to become about the psychologist, then it's a problem. It has to be really stay focused on the patient. And the second part of your question was just now.
Oh, yes, about that the patient may be doing something for their own reasons, and that the psychotherapist has to look through that mask or that motivation to see what's true.
Yes, absolutely. And again, that's a good psychologist, right? Somebody who's well trained, who maintains professional boundaries, which my character steps over. It becomes problematic. And the reason he does is because he can't, he's so triggered by things that she knows about his past that he can't maintain those boundaries. Again, real life psychologists don't make great fictional characters.
Well, but we can totally understand why he would be upset that this person comes and seems to know things that she shouldn't know. You were saying earlier that the genesis of the book was really the characters. Tell us the main characters we should know in this novel and what their roles are.
Sure. So there's Gregory Weber, our clinical psychologist, who's burdened by the guilt of this horrific thing he did when he was 17 years old, something that nobody else who's alive knows about. And he carries that lie of omission into his marriage with his lovely wife, Olivia Weber. And she doesn't know why Gregory um, is so taciturn, why he's not forthcoming, why he seems to hide pieces of himself. And so, whereas Gregory quietly holds this burden of this thing he did, um, on Wednesdays at 1, a woman, Meera Patel, begins appearing in his office, and she seems to know things about this horrible thing that he did when he was 17. So it sends him into turmoil, obviously, because nobody should know about this thing he did. And and then the story really takes off from there. And the question of the story becomes, who is this Mira? Is she a figment of his imagination? Is she a femme fatale, a wannabe therapist, or an avenging spirit related to his past sin? So that's the reader's journey to figure out who Mira
You
is.
could never, when you read Wednesdays at 1, you all, and I know you will, you can get it at any favorite bookstore right now, Wednesdays at 1 by Sandra Miller. You just don't even try to figure it out. I mean, I tried to figure it out and I did not figure it out. Don't even try to figure it out. So there's this mystery of Mira, but it's in the milieu of Gregory's real life with the people in his world, with his wife and the other people in his world, that he's having to juggle this thing that's happening to him and pretend that everything is okay. How did you get into his head?
Well, it's interesting. I think this actually speaks to having written a memoir first, where it's really first person. It's a very internal story. And I wanted to create that same whispery confessional tone with Gregory. And so it's third person point of view limited, right? So we spend the whole time, everything we see through Gregory's perspective. And I feel like when I really sunk down deeply into Gregory's character, I could see this story. I could track everyone else. I could be self-reflective as Gregory. And so it was really um, about just inhabiting Gregory. I tried to write the story from the female client's perspective. That was my first try at it, and it absolutely didn't work. And I couldn't figure out why. It seemed to make sense that would be the point of view. When I got into Gregory, the story opened up. It was magic. In fact, his relationships appeared, his sister, his wife, everything sort of clarified around the Gregory point of view. So it was a bit of a gift.
I mean, well, Sue Grafton actually called it the magic, the thing that happens sometimes to writers, if we're lucky, where, you were talking about inhabiting Gregory. And sometimes when you were writing, the words just seem to come out that we're almost just transcribing them, not making them up. What do you think about that experience as a writer and when that happens?
That absolutely happened to me with this book, and I've joked with other writers. I think it's a one-off. I feel a little bit like arrogant about it because it came in like a download. It was the pandemic summer of 2020 when it was really hard you couldn't do anything or go anywhere or have a party or a barbecue or go to the movies, and so it came like this gift. This story unfolded, and every day I wrote 1,000 words for 3 months, and at the end of the summer I had a novel. It was highly unusual. You might operate like this, you going on to your 15th novel, but this is not how I operate. I'm going to sort of slower to the story, but this one appeared, and the characters were there. I showed up every morning, and the characters showed up, and the story unfolded. Um, so It's funny because I'm working on something else right now, and I don't have the same ease. So I have to go back and think that was a really wonderful experience. Stephen King says novels aren't we don't create novels. They're found things, and we excavate. And I do think there's some of that happened
You
here.
have to be shown the way. You have to be shown the place to dig, to continue that thought. And I do think that there is something that sometimes we get that the universe is saying, "This is for you now. Take this and do this or not." and you did. And I think it's a little bit fragile. And I think that you were incredibly brave and wise just to keep going. But you have, it's not just magic. It's you. It's you, Sandra, and your brain and your thought process and your devotion to this story. I mean, it's about grief, and it's about guilt, and it's about relationships, and it's about forgiveness. Why are those emotions so powerful?
I think those are the themes of my childhood. Those are the themes that imprinted most heavily on me. I was raised a good Catholic girl in New Britain, Connecticut, and I experienced a lot of guilt and shame and needing to be forgiven over the course of my life. And it started out very, very young, I think, in my formative years. And I think when those feelings, those experiences, those themes set in that early, they stay with you. They stalk you a little bit. They track you. They follow you into your writing. I have certain themes that will always, always be in my writing. There's a dad, a very complicated father in this novel. I had a very complicated father that I explore in my memoir, and I feel like as long as I have a book, there's going to be a complicated father whose you know relationship needs to be worked out with the protagonist. So I think that those issues are always just available to me, emotionally available to me.
And I also think that they're perfect because you can grow through them. You can grow out of grief or come through grief, or you can evolve through grief, and you can just learn about forgiveness, and you can learn about regret and guilt. You can face guilt. So it gives your character a way to grow. And also another engine of this book, and we're talking about Wednesdays at 1, literary suspense by Sandra Miller. Also secrets. Everyone has a secret. Talk a little bit about how that works in your novel and why that's important.
Yeah, I love secrets. I was saying this to my cousin the other day. She had just read the book and we were talking about secrets, and I said, I love secrets. I'm a Scorpio. I love secrets. And she said, "Oh, I don't love secrets." And I thought, "Oh, I thought everybody loves secrets." So maybe that's I like family secrets. I like secrets that surprise you, that you find out that there's been not necessarily painful secrets that hurt people, but when you find out some interesting dynamic that's been going on in a family, or this thing happened and you would never suspect it. And that's what I wanted to implant in this novel. This idea that this very successful doctor with his ostensibly successful life in Cambridge, Massachusetts, they live a very privileged life, that there's this secret that has infected all of their lives just because Gregory withheld it for, in this case, 30 years. So I love the idea of how a secret can damage and mutate and change the entire dynamics of a family. In this case, not for the better, but
Yes, and it does indeed in Wednesdays at 1, because the thing about a secret is it's difficult to keep. It changes your life to have to keep keeping it. And when someone threatens to tell it, you know that your life is about to come crashing down. And even a psychologist may not be able to figure out how to handle that.
yeah, exactly. That's this book, and very well said. That's this book in a nutshell, right? He can't handle it, right? When somebody comes and seems to have access to a secret that absolutely nobody should know.
Could know. Nobody could know.
Nobody could possibly know. So how does she know this, and how does he manage this? Well, that's the
And
story.
one of my favorite discussions was with Sophie Hannah, the wonderful mystery author Sophie Hannah, who writes Poirot now, as well as her own wonderful standalone mystery novels. She's a Brit, and she was talking about that the thing that she says is the hallmark of a wonderful novel is when they start out with one impossible thing, when there's something that's happening that's just could not happen, and the reader is compelled to find out what that impossible thing is and how that could possibly be, and that readers could figure out what they think, but they just can't wait to find out what the author has decided the solution to the impossible thing is. And you have done that here. Did you do that on purpose? Did you think, was that a first thing that you thought of?
I don't think so. I think that was part of the revelation for me, that the story came to me, and I had to honor the characters as they told the story to me. And again, that is not typically how I operate as a writer. So I usually try to be, I'm a little bit more controlling. But I think that's interesting what Sophie Hannah said. I love that. I also think that all novels, but especially thrillers, really need broken relationships and family dysfunction. And I'll often look at lists of what creates a good thriller novel. Well, a compelling villain, a protagonist who faces obstacles, twists and turns. But I think the basis for any good novel, and particularly a thriller, is that there needs to be family dysfunction and relationship dysfunction in order for all of these events to unfold in compelling and surprising and unexpected ways.
Yes, and a compelling problem that needs to be solved, or
Yep.
else something terrible will happen. And how can they do that? I hope you will look when this is over. Deborah Puss is saying your novel sounds fabulous. So much applause with your book and for Wednesdays at 1. And don't forget to leave a question or a comment, because we are giving away, well, we're not, Sandra and Zibby are giving away I'm keeping this one, a copy of Wednesdays at 1 to one lucky commenter. You mentioned earlier, and one of the things when I was looking up your bio, that just sort of hit me in the middle of my brain, was that your Kerry Washington played you in a movie. Can you give us the background of how that happened?
Talk about a thriller, right? That was so unexpected. I had two young children. I was a mom. I was teaching part time, and I was at the library one day, and I saw that this is when you would flip through old magazines, right, at the library. And I was going through Glamour magazine, and there was a contest, a real moments contest, REEL moments, and it said, "Tell us a real moment in your life, and if your story is chosen, it will be turned into a short film with top Hollywood talent." So that night, 750 words, I shot it off like with a glass of Chardonnay at my computer while the kids were sleeping. I pressed send. I didn't even edit it, and I won. And as a result, the movie was made. Kerry Washington played me. Trudy Styler, Sting's wife, directed. Sting put a song in it that won a Grammy. It was crazy. I had a red carpet premiere with Sting and Trudy and Kerry, and it was a moment. Talk about a real moment. It was a surreal moment. It was really amazing.
That's amazing. What, you're so right. That's incredible. What was the story?
It was the story of how I met my husband in a very unexpected way that I actually tell more in depth in my memoir. And it was something nobody could have predicted, and no writer probably would write, because it seems too impossible. But that's what it was. So it was called, and the story was called Wait. I was working as a waitress at the time, and
Working as a
and it has to do with him being a psychologist, and that's all I'll hint at. You can find it on YouTube. I think they have the movie on YouTube.
Yes,
now.
I saw that it is indeed
Yeah.
on YouTube. And what is the title of your memoir? So people will want to read that, I'm sure.
Right. It's called Trove: A Woman's Search for Truth and Buried Treasure.
And how did you've looked for buried treasure? You've looked for treasure, at least, since you were a little girl. Do you feel that your literary life is searching for treasure as well?
Yes, I think so. I think that as creatives, we are often looking for something. We're looking to answer questions about ourselves, about our lives. I think that's why we create characters, to explore these aspects, as you said before. And I think that honestly, for about 30 years, Hank, I have wanted to publish a novel. And with this novel, it sounds a little corny, but it is the experience of feeling like I've found a treasure. Somebody asked me at a book reading the other day, they said, "What are you going to do now?" And I said, "I don't know. It's what do you do when your dream comes true?" I have plenty to do. I know that. And there are other things to write and other avenues to pursue. But one of the most exciting things for me about this is that I didn't stop searching. I didn't give up. I hunted in all sorts of ways. I did the work. I dug, and it's here.
Oh, you're bringing tears to my eyes. That is marvelous. We are talking about this treasure of a novel, Wednesdays at 1 by Sandra Miller. Please look for this wherever books are sold. And I know the fabulous Margaret is putting links in the chat for all of you to click and get this book for yourself. Let's take some questions from the audience if we have those queued up and see what people want to know from Sandra Miller as we close out this interview. Susie Baldwin is saying, I will check that movie out. And Vicki says, what a great story about weight. Oh, Emily says, do you sort of know how to read people's body language? What a great question that is.
Great question. I think that as writers, we go around with our antennae out all day, paying attention. We're sensitive creatures, right? Writers. And so I feel like I do. You probably do too, Hank, right? Having done so many interviews, right? You can read body language or read a room. But absolutely, I think that as writers, we are constantly attuned to people's behaviors, their body language, how they're responding to us. For good or ill, we're sensitive. I'm sensitive. And so yes, I'm constantly looking at how people behave around me and
We
how and
embrace that.
reading into that.
Yeah, we embrace that. When you're writing, like I do, sometimes if I'm writing about, she tossed her hair and something, and I'll sit here and do that. Or I'll, raise my eyebrow or make an expression and try to figure out how to describe that expression. What does that really mean? If you have a face that looks like this, what emotion are you really feeling? And I know that I change my posture depending on the character that I'm writing. Did you do that too in this book?
Yeah, when I was writing Gregory, I did become more self-reflective, and I found that I was a little bit. I think this happens maybe because I was a memoirist first. I
Mm.
was I was very self-aware as I wrote the memoir, writing about myself. So when I took on the persona of Gregory, I didn't completely take it on, but when I wrote this character, I did feel this certain like self-awareness that he had. I remember looking into the mirror, trying to see what he saw when he saw his face and studying my own face in the way that he studied his face. So definitely there is that, right? Or you do at your desk, you have to mime what the character is doing so you can actually write about it. Yeah, I do that constantly.
And that's why every book is so different. That's why only you, Sandra, that's why only you could have written this book. Because in every way, it is purely, purely from your imagination and from your creativity. Only you could have written this. Let's take another question. Do you draw, paint? Says Renee. Really, I'm so nice to see you here, Renee. Do you draw, paint, or do anything else that's creative?
I have a piano in my kitchen and I sit down and I play a few tunes very poorly, but it's so relaxing when you're looking at music, reading those notes, especially if you don't do it instinctively or well, like me. It really takes you out of your head. And so that would be my one other creative thing. I've dabbled in the arts. My daughter is a costume designer and she's fabulous with fabrics, but give me something to sew and I'll just, make a mess of it. So my other hobby is disc golf. I'm a big disc golfer. So
Do you play the Sting song?
the Sting song,
What was the song that he wrote for
what
your
are you
movie?
doing for the rest of your life? Yes, every so often my husband and I will play. It's so romantic.
Oh, that's so nice. That's just such a fantastic story. I love the idea that you just banged out those words and your entire life changed. You all know this, but my husband and I don't celebrate the anniversary of the day we met, and this is so apropos of your meeting. My husband and I celebrate the anniversary of the day before we met, and we call that "You Never Know Day," because you never know what wonderful thing is about to happen, and you are certainly the proof of that.
I love that. I love that. That's really fun, right? That's like the wonderful thing about life. Like the day before, you didn't
You
know.
just never know.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Let's take one last question before we let you go. Tell us about the cover, says Sherry.
Oh yeah, Emily Mahan, who is a fabulous designer. They gave me a couple of options, and the publisher and I looked at them, and they didn't seem to really capture the depth or the story. And then as soon as we saw this one, I think it was perfection. I love it. Has a little mid-century feel. There's the mysterious woman who's kind of, blurred out a little bit, suggesting that, what is she doing there? And I love the pink because then I get to wear pink things.
Exactly. And the couch is great, is perfect.
Yeah.
We should let you go, Sandra. It is marvelous. But before you do, let's spin the wheel of fun and see who is going to win a copy of Wednesdays at 1. Look at all the people who are here. This is marvelous. Thank you all so much for coming. This is great. And the winner is Kathy Lanigan. This is so fabulous, Kathy. So Kathy is a wonderful fan of Crime Time and a dear pal. And I'm so pleased that she won this book. Kathy, you will get some instructions on how to email me, and we will make sure that Zibby and Sandra get you a copy of Wednesdays at 1. As I said, I'm keeping this one, so we will get you your very own copy. Sandra, tell us about your website and where to find you. And I know you're doing more events as your launch continues.
I am. Yeah, thanks. I'm at sandraamiller.com, and I have all of my events posted on my website, but also you should follow Zibby Books to see a fabulous publisher who's doing really innovative things, and she keeps us all, everybody updated on all of the events going on.
And you're on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook as well?
I am. Yeah, I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and I tweet now and then. So
we'll see what happens with that. But you all follow Sandra Miller. You can find her via her website, and you know about social media. Just follow Sandra and Zibby Books to find out all about Wednesdays at 1 and where you can meet Sandra in person and get a signed copy of her book. Thank you, Emily. Thank you for the fun, and thank you all for being here. Quickly before I let you go, let me remind you that next Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET, which is August the 1st, which I have to tell you is the pub date for the trade paperback of The House Guest, Just Saying. We will have Mindy Mejia, the marvelous Mindy Mejia, and her novel To Catch a Storm, which has the best cut line in the world, which is, a physicist and a psychic team up to solve a crime. Is that not perfect? A physicist and a psychic. Talk about instant conflict. And Mindy Mejia is fantastic. So I want you all please to come next Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET to hear all about To Catch a Storm. Until then, thank you, Sandra. You are marvelous and generous and revealing. It was great to talk with you.
Thank you, Hank. It's been wonderful to be here.
My complete pleasure. And you all, we'll see you next week. Do you hear the thunder? It's thundering and lightning again here in Newton. But remember, until next time, it is always safe inside a book. And thank you.